The screams that echoed across the Aegean Sea in 480 BCE were not those of warriors dying honorably in battle, but of innocents suffering fates that historians have deliberately obscured for over 2 millennia. When we speak of Xerxes and his invasion of Greece, we focus on heroic last stands at Thermopylae and naval clashes at Salamis. We celebrate the courage of Spartan warriors and Athenian sailors, while conveniently overlooking what the Persian king did to the women and children of conquered Greek cities. The sanitized version of history presents warfare as a gentleman's game between armies, but the reality was infinitely more brutal. Xerxes I, the self-proclaimed King of Kings, commanded the largest military force the ancient world had ever seen. Conservative estimates place his army at over 200,000 men, though some ancient sources claim numbers exceeding 1 million. This vast host swept down from Asia Minor like a plague of locusts, consuming everything in its path. Behind the glittering ranks of immortals and the thunder of war elephants marched something far more sinister than any conventional army. This was a machine of systematic terror designed not merely to conquer territory but to break the spirit of an entire civilization. The Persian approach to warfare transcended simple military conquest. Xerxes understood that lasting domination required more than defeating enemy soldiers. It demanded the complete psychological subjugation of civilian populations. The methods he employed were calculated acts of cruelty that targeted the most vulnerable members of Greek society. What happened to the daughters of Hellas during the Persian invasion represents one of history's most systematic campaigns of sexual violence and human trafficking, yet these crimes have been largely erased from popular memory. Ancient sources, when they dare to mention these atrocities at all, do so in euphemistic language that obscures the full horror of what transpired. Herodotus writes of women being taken for the pleasure of the great king, while Thucydides mentions cities where the females were distributed among the victors. These sanitized phrases mask a reality of organized rape, forced prostitution, and sexual slavery on an industrial scale. The daughters of Greek families were not simply casualties of war, but specific targets of a deliberate campaign to humiliate and destroy Hellenic culture through the violation of its women. The Persian invasion began in earnest when Xerxes crossed the Hellespont on his famous bridge of boats, but the true horror commenced as his forces encountered their first Greek settlements. The coastal cities of Ionia had already experienced Persian rule for decades, and their populations knew what to expect from renewed subjugation. Archaeological evidence from sites like Miletus and Ephesus reveals hasty attempts to hide valuables and evacuate families, suggesting widespread panic among civilians who understood the fate awaiting them. The Persian military machine operated with terrifying efficiency in processing conquered populations. Specialized units within Xerxes' army were tasked specifically with identifying and securing women of childbearing age from captured cities. These were not random acts of violence committed by undisciplined soldiers, but organized operations conducted under direct royal authority. Persian records, preserved in cuneiform tablets discovered in modern-day Iran, detail the systematic cataloguing of female captives by age, physical attributes, and perceived social status. Young women from aristocratic families commanded premium prices in Persian slave markets, while peasant girls were distributed among common soldiers as rewards for service. The most beautiful captives were reserved for the royal harem, or given as gifts to Persian nobles who had distinguished themselves in battle. This commodification of human beings reached levels of bureaucratic precision that would not be seen again until the industrial-scale atrocities of the 20th century. The psychological warfare inherent in these practices extended far beyond their immediate victims. Greek communities that had not yet fallen to Persian forces received detailed accounts of what awaited their own daughters and wives. These reports, carried by refugees and escaped slaves, described scenes of unimaginable degradation designed to break resistance before Persian forces even arrived. The mere knowledge that surrender meant the systematic rape and enslavement of their women drove some Greek cities to desperate acts of collective suicide rather than submit to Persian rule. The island of Sitalaia provides a particularly harrowing example of Persian methods. When this small community refused to submit to Xerxes' demands, Persian forces landed and systematically worked their way through the population. Contemporary accounts describe how women and girls were lined up in the town square while Persian officers made their selections. Mothers were forced to watch as their daughters were claimed by foreign soldiers, knowing they would never see them again. The few male survivors who managed to escape to Athens reported that the screams could be heard across the water for 3 days. The scale of these operations required extensive logistical support that reveals the premeditated nature of Persian war crimes. Supply trains accompanying Xerxes' army included specialized wagons designed for transporting large numbers of captive women across vast distances. These mobile prisons were equipped with chains, locks, and other restraining devices that demonstrate the systematic planning behind the enslavement operations. Persian quartermasters maintained detailed records of captive populations, tracking inventory like any other military resource. The cultural impact of these practices extended far beyond their immediate victims. Greek society, with its emphasis on honor and family reputation, was particularly vulnerable to this form of psychological warfare. The violation of Greek women was understood by both sides as an attack on the fundamental values of Hellenic civilization. Persian commanders deliberately publicized their actions, ensuring that news of atrocities spread quickly throughout the Greek world to maximize their psychological impact. The religious dimensions of these crimes added another layer of horror to an already nightmarish situation. Many of the captured women served as priestesses in Greek temples, making their violation a deliberate act of sacrilege designed to offend Greek religious sensibilities. Persian forces specifically targeted sacred sites, dragging priestesses from altars where they had sought sanctuary and subjecting them to public degradation. These acts were not mere byproducts of military conquest, but calculated assaults on Greek spiritual beliefs. The economic aspects of the slave trade that followed Persian conquests reveal the industrial scale of these operations. Captive Greek women became a major commodity in Persian markets, with established trade routes carrying them to buyers across the vast Persian Empire. Price lists preserved in Persian administrative documents show that Greek women commanded premium prices due to their perceived beauty and education levels. This commodification created powerful economic incentives for continued raids against Greek territories, even after major military objectives had been achieved. The fate of children born from these forced unions adds another tragic dimension to the story. Persian law considered offspring of Greek slave women to be property of their fathers, creating a generation of half-Greek children raised as Persians within the empire. These children were often used as interpreters and guides in subsequent military campaigns against Greece, forced to participate in attacks against their mother's homeland. The psychological trauma of this forced betrayal of their Greek heritage represents another calculated cruelty in the Persian campaign of cultural destruction. The geographic scope of these atrocities extended far beyond the famous battlefields that dominate historical accounts. While popular memory focuses on heroic resistance at sites like Thermopylae and Marathon, Persian forces simultaneously conducted systematic raids against civilian populations throughout the Greek islands and coastal regions. These operations, often overlooked by military historians focused on major battles, may have affected more individual lives than the famous confrontations between armies. The documentation of these crimes in Persian administrative records suggests that the systematic nature of the violence was not merely a byproduct of military culture, but reflected deliberate policy decisions made at the highest levels of the Persian government. Xerxes himself appears to have personally reviewed reports of captive populations and made decisions about their distribution among his supporters. This direct royal involvement in war crimes demonstrates that the atrocities committed against Greek women were not unauthorized actions by rogue commanders, but integral components of Persian imperial strategy. The mechanisms through which Persian forces identified and processed their victims reveal a chilling attention to detail that transforms individual tragedies into systematic horror. Persian military units included specialized personnel trained in evaluating human cargo, men who could assess the potential value of captive women with the same clinical precision that others applied to cataloging gold and livestock. These evaluators examined teeth, skin, and physical development to determine suitable roles within the vast Persian slave network, treating human beings as mere commodities to be sorted and priced. The transportation networks that carried Greek captives into the heart of the Persian Empire represent one of antiquity's most extensive human trafficking operations. Caravans stretching for miles crossed the dusty roads of Asia Minor, their wagons filled with chained women and children torn from their families and homeland. Rest stations along these routes included facilities specifically designed for managing large groups of captives, complete with holding pens and processing centers where the human cargo could be redistributed according to market demands. Persian administrative efficiency extended even to the most intimate aspects of their captives' suffering. Records indicate that pregnant women received different classifications than others, their unborn children already factored into economic calculations before birth. Young mothers were separated from their infants according to predetermined protocols, with babies often distributed to Persian families seeking children while their mothers were assigned to other fates. This systematic destruction of family bonds served the dual purpose of preventing coordinated resistance and maximizing the psychological trauma inflicted upon Greek communities. The religious justifications that Persian authorities used to legitimize these practices reveal how cultural differences were weaponized to dehumanize victims. Persian Zoroastrian beliefs were twisted to portray Greek women as corrupted beings who required purification through servitude to their Persian betters. This theological framework provided a veneer of righteousness to acts of unspeakable cruelty, allowing perpetrators to view their crimes as divinely sanctioned duties rather than moral failures. The training programs implemented within Persian harems and noble households demonstrate the long-term planning behind these operations. Greek women were subjected to intensive indoctrination designed to strip away their cultural identity and replace it with subservience to Persian customs. Those who resisted this psychological conditioning faced punishments designed not merely to inflict pain, but to break their spirit completely. The survivors who eventually adapted to their circumstances often found themselves serving as instructors for newly arrived captives, perpetuating the cycle of cultural destruction. The intelligence networks that Persian forces used to identify valuable targets within Greek communities reveal the sophisticated planning that preceded each military campaign. Persian spies, often disguised as merchants or travelers, had been gathering information about prominent Greek families for years before Xerxes launched his invasion. These advanced scouts compiled detailed lists of wealthy households, noting the ages and appearances of daughters who might prove particularly valuable in Persian markets. This preliminary reconnaissance ensured that when Persian forces arrived, they could immediately locate and secure the most desirable captives. The seasonal timing of Persian raids was calculated to maximize both military effectiveness and the psychological impact on Greek communities. Attacks often coincided with religious festivals when entire families would be gathered in public spaces, making mass captures more efficient. The violation of sacred celebrations added another layer of trauma to the experience, forever associating Greek cultural traditions with memories of horror and loss. Persian commanders understood that destroying the cultural calendar was as important as conquering territory in their campaign to break Greek resistance. The medical aspects of maintaining large captive populations reveal another dimension of Persian organizational capabilities. Military physicians within Xerxes' army included specialists trained in keeping slaves healthy enough to survive long journeys and maintain their market value. These medical professionals developed techniques for treating injuries sustained during capture, while simultaneously ensuring that captives remained sufficiently weakened to prevent escape attempts. The clinical detachment with which these healers approached human suffering demonstrates how thoroughly the Persian military machine had systematized cruelty. The role of Greek collaborators in facilitating these atrocities adds a particularly bitter dimension to the historical record. Some Greek cities, faced with the choice between destruction and submission, actively participated in identifying families within their own communities who possessed valuable daughters. These collaborations often involved complex negotiations where local leaders traded the freedom of some citizens for promises of better treatment for others. The moral compromises forced upon Greek communities by Persian occupation created divisions that persisted long after the military threat had passed. The economic disruption caused by the systematic removal of young women from Greek communities extended far beyond immediate family tragedies. Traditional marriage patterns collapsed when entire generations of potential wives disappeared into Persian slavery, creating demographic imbalances that affected Greek society for decades. Agricultural communities found themselves unable to maintain family farms when the daughters who would have married local men and contributed to household labor were no longer available. These long-term consequences may have weakened Greek resistance more effectively than any military defeat. The psychological conditioning techniques employed in Persian training facilities demonstrate